If you are of a previous generation, you might have heard the term Shibboleth test used as a kind of loyalty test. But this term has an interesting background in linguistics and history. Today, we are going to talk about the history of the Shibboleth test. And if you like these videos, please help us out by subscribing, or if you want to help us out financially, please consider becoming a Patreon member or by purchasing my book, The Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian Context. When we talk about Shibboleth tests, we are talking about a kind of loyalty test based upon the way somebody acts or speaks. Now, I'm going to tell you a true story. This actually happened to me. There was a time when I had to do a business trip in Tucson, Arizona. I decided to take a day off and go to Tombstone to check out the OK Corral, being a bit of a fan of sort of the Wyatt Earp legend. On the way back, there happens to be a Homeland Security checkpoint. And what they do is you're supposed to drive up to the booth, roll down the window, and then they start getting you talking. Well, when I drove up, I rolled down the window, and the Homeland Security agent asked, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Wow, man, I went to Tombstone, man. It was like totally awesome, dude." The guard just tried to suppress a smirk, but he just quite couldn't. You just see the corners of his mouth just go, and he just waved me through. What he was doing was he was checking to see if I had a Mexican accent. What I gave him was a California surfer accent. He was trying to check if I was supposed to be inside the country based upon how I spoke. That is a kind of Shibboleth test. And we see perhaps the earliest form of Shibboleth test in the Bible. We see it in Judges 12, verses 4 to 6. And I read, "Then Japheth gathered all the men of Gilead and fought Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim because they said, quote, 'You are fugitives of Ephraim, O Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and in the midst of Manasseh,' end quote. And the Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan opposite Ephraim. And it happened when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, quote, 'Let me cross over,' end quote, the men of Gilead would say to him, quote, 'Are you an Ephraimite?' Quote, if he said no, they would say to him, 'Say now, Shibboleth.' But he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it correctly. Then they seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. Thus fell at that time 42,000 of Ephraim." So what we have happening here is that when Japheth went to attack the Ammonites, he excluded the Ephraimites from the combat. The Ephraimites, feeling slighted at this, attacked Gilead. And Japheth turned around and defeated the Ephraimites. But some of the Ephraimites were on the wrong side of the river. And knowing that this vendetta was going on, they tried to flee. And many were caught by the Gileadites. and to see if they were from Ephraim, they would apply this test based upon how someone spoke. And this is the origin of the so-called Shibboleth test. The way the test works is that the Gileadites would make a person say Shibboleth. That word begins with the letter Shin in Hebrew. This is a Hebrew character that has a sh sound like ship or shake or shadow. In linguistics, this is called a voiceless postvelar fricative. And if the person was able to pronounce the sh sound, they could go free. However, the pronunciation of the shin was not static. And for the people of Ephraim, they pronounced the shin like a sibilant S. This makes shake sound like sake. They were not able to pronounce that sh sound. It came out as a s instead of a sh. This is a shift in pronunciation that often happened between the shin and the sibilant S. In fact, depending upon the language and the culture, those languages that had both a shin and a regular sibilant S, sometimes the two pronunciations switched positions and even sometimes alternated back. So here we have an identity based upon the way a person speaks. And this is the origin of the Shibboleth test as an oversimplified test to discover who is in the in-group and who is outside of the in-group. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that and thought that was interesting. And thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.